Hi everyone, I'm Kadambari Sahu. I'm the head of design at Value Labs. Welcome to the first episode of Design Inspire, an initiative to connect designers across the global design community. Just a brief about this initiative, Design Inspire is a web series of passionate, innovative, and young inspiring designers. The web series dive into their passion, inspiration, and what makes them go. It's an effort to understand how they are navigating their career path and how they are investing their creative energies. We believe hearing their bold moves and inspiring stories will ignite interest and inspire the next generation of budding designers across the globe. So let's go forward with our guest today, Sebastian.
Sebastian is a strategic designer who loves to design brand shaping positive human experiences that unite physical and digital worlds. Currently, he is designing mobility futures at BMW Group, focusing on digital services, mobile application, customer journeys, interface design, experience prototyping for AR/VR in the context of mobility. He has worked with global in-house design studios like Bosch Home Appliance Groups, as well as innovation design consultancies like DesignWorks in Los Angeles or Minimal in Chicago, besides other. He holds masters in advanced product design from Umeå Institute of Design, Sweden, as well as bachelor's in industrial design from Folkwang University of Arts, Germany. So welcome, Sebastian.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm super happy to be here. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm going to talk about why and how design drives innovation, mainly from two backgrounds. One working at BMW in the UX design team, working on future mobility experiences on the one side on the onboard experience, so meaning the in-car experience, and then the other side, the off-board experience, meaning the experience of apps and services. And then the second part is I'm also running a podcast called Design Drives. Started with a podcast in 2018 and then also turned this year into a conference in February. And actually I had the chance to interview over 60 from in-house experience, but then also they're running their own consultancies or own entrepreneurship ventures even. And very interesting to learn about these different perspectives and different learnings about how design can contribute to innovation and can really drive an impact. And this is something I would really like to facilitate with the podcast, is to raise the awareness of the impact of design and talk about these different stories, facilitate the space for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about two things that I learned. It's like one side, the input part, and the other one, the output part. Learnings from my own projects, but then also a lot the podcast experience itself. So the first being about designing the input and actually why it's important to facilitate that process and the insights together. Why it's as important to design this, because it's going to influence the output. From a personal side, before we jump into the podcast examples, was Internet Design Works in LA, and we worked business class seat experience. And essentially, it was a lot of virtual design. So you design it in 3D on your computer. But after some point, like there's so many things, ergonomic things to solve, experience topics to solve, that you just hit a dead end when it comes to the digital design process. Even if you have VR, etc., you need to somehow try it out and see how the whole flow works, the whole journey for a user, in order to determine some of the decisions you need to make. So I actually spent a lot of time in this project building things in cardboard. So actually cutting cardboard, gluing it together, sitting on an office chair, sort of designed like cardboard space around that. And basically then one person was the person bringing the food, another person was the passenger, and then we flipped roles and somebody played the neighbor. So we used a lot of role playing. It's a really great tool for these kind of things, especially if you talk about spatial experiences. And just tried it out and try to again understand how does it feel. Okay, I get in the plane, where do I put my personal items? Okay, now the situation. What happens if I start to work, right? Where do I place my laptop? What if I have a bigger laptop? What if I have a smaller laptop, etc.? So you can really try them out and then determine where are great spaces to do this. What does feel comfortable, right? If you get the food, so all of these things you can determine. And this is, great for designers because we are very good into prototyping these things. So and it's good sometimes to leave the designer desk. basically. The second example brought here was actually my master thesis with BMW over 2 years ago. And I tried to spend as much time in the actual car and journey as possible. So especially I think if a customer experience journey is a little bit more complex, if your project service happen at different locations, different situations, different users, try to experience this and try to be in that situation or location. For example, if you design an app for a hospital, try to spend as much time in a hospital, try to get like a room in the hospital, try to facilitate brainstorm sessions there. Because just being at the location, being near the situation or around the situation, you will come up with completely different ideas. And that was really striking to me. Brainstorming while driving on driving experiences is definitely something that really shifts like the insights you get and the ideas you get. So yeah, I try to make the vehicle the design studio basically, and try to spend a lot of time there, and I think try to facilitate prototyping and brainstorming in that space. And yeah, looking backwards, I think it was really driving empathy and contextual insights for like new ideas. Another example then here from the podcast I have with me is actually the first episode was with Cheryl Platz, and she was one of the first designers on the Amazon Alexa team. And basically she talks about why context is super important and why you need to design that input phase. She was talking about having different rooms for getting context for different situations they worked on. With voice experience especially, it's not so much about doing completely new interactions, but often about doing interactions that feel better in the moment. In order to determine this, you really need to be in the context, because you maybe use multimodality as an approach, right? Basically, she was talking about these different rooms and try to play out these different interactions, because you need to come up with the use case, try it out. Like, I get up in the morning. Is there something that feels right to say to such a device? But let's play out different situations. Role play again as a tool to determine these different use cases and get an understanding what kind of modalities make sense. And it's like impossible, sitting in front of a computer. You need to be in the situation. Another, I think, way to design the input field is to take on different perspectives and the topic of inclusivity and accessibility. So I talked to Laura Silver. She is VP of Accessibility Technology at Bank of America. She's also UX lead, and before that she worked at Amazon. She basically was saying her vision to technology is that technology is ultimately adapting to us, meaning the user, instead of the other way around, because that's how it is at the moment. And there's so much to improve on that end. If you think you hit a dead end when it comes to innovation, especially thinking about inclusivity, accessibility, there's like so much to improve on all kind of product or services and things we maybe haven't considered in our design, right? I think it's important to take on different perspectives and think about other users that are maybe not the target user, situations that are maybe not in the happy flow that you're designing. Because first of all, I think new scenarios are going to arise that will surface spaces for innovation that you haven't thought about. And second step, it will be beneficial for a lot of users. Talking especially about inclusivity, the next aspect is about the importance of unlearning, breaking assumptions. This was coming up over and over in the podcast, but especially in the episode with Mario van Molen, who is a design leader in Singapore, and he wrote a book about counterintuitivity. And I think it's great, especially if you work in design consultancy, we come up with less assumptions into a project. And then if you're an expert in the field, you maybe want to consider to find ways to unlearn before you want to work on an innovation project. And there are great tools for this. Talking about Mario van Molen, in his book about counterintuitivity, talking about especially one example, maybe some of you already heard about this. It's from Abraham Wald. He was a mechanic in the Second World War in Eastern Europe. And basically he was asked by his leads to look at the planes that came back from the war fights and look at the areas that the planes were hit the most. And you need to improve these areas because apparently these are the areas where the planes get hit the most. He was basically saying, well, maybe the areas where planes are hit the most typically is maybe the area we shouldn't improve, because apparently planes still come back. If planes are hit in other areas where we don't see any damage, that probably means they fall off the sky because they are weak in these areas. I think if you go into a project and especially again with leapfrog innovation, try to list down all the assumptions you would never question about your product or service or the field you're designing in, right? And then you try to flip them. So you say it's the opposite. How would that change the whole landscape we're looking at? The second part I would like to talk about output. One side to design impact, and then also on the strategic side to define requirements. 3 examples here from myself before we jump into the podcast examples. One is about designing strategy and vision. So again, basically this was the execution part of the thesis I was touching on earlier, where it was about exploring inside the car. What the project turned out to was an interactive side window where people can get better connected to the location outside, and basically looking in how this would change the passenger experience. So the idea is basically that you go back in time and show the other passengers in the vehicle what you discovered outside. Especially if you drive with multiple people. Think about bigger technical innovations. From an experience side, I think it's important to design visions or design UX visions, because this vision is going to help out, I think, first to evaluate if the future actually makes sense. That's great with design, because we can prototype these visions and make them feel real even though they're not real. And you can basically look at the prototype. Okay, this is the experience we want to hit in 3 years. That's how it would feel like. What kind of context you're designing, what kind of industry. Let's say if you design in an airplane scenario, the development process is like 10 years. So, and then obviously if you work on an app, maybe you don't have to think longer than half a year or 1 year. So it depends on the context, like where's the scenario happening, etc. Gathered on assumptions you have, gathered on the insights you have, maybe on technical innovations that you see coming up or could be developed, on business opportunities. Let's say, how would a new business model impact the experience? And you can design these visions and basically look into, okay, that's how it will feel like. And then you can evaluate it. You can have a discussion at least, right? Because otherwise you will never have the discussion, because you will just do incremental innovation, but you never really know where the road is going. And before investing the time, you need to determine if that actually makes sense to go that path. Another thing that comes up over and over in the podcast, but it's also something I experienced myself, was a project with Husqvarna, designing a vision in order to maybe talk about a business problem or a business opportunity, let's call it like this. So basically Gardena's business, especially running on the summer, because they are selling gardening tools. So during the winter they have less income. And as you know, indoor farming is a big space. So, and basically try to design a best case scenario for the user where we think people adapting to this, and for Gardena selling also products basically during the winter time, because indoor farming you can basically do all year, right? So we designed the app, we designed the prototypes for the product, we did like a movie for how the journey would be from somebody who would heard about the brand, to trying it out to a small degree, getting like an entry product, and then sort of building out their home garden to all the way 1 year user, how would that relationship change with the brand, and how would that interaction play out, and give to them, and they could talk about this and can evaluate if it makes sense. Is it actually possible on the technical side in the long run? So you have something to talk about and to make a decision. Visualization in the end that creates knowledge for decision making in a way. Another aspect where this comes in, I interviewed Shan He. She was one of the founding members of Uber's visualization team. She was on the podcast, and basically she is working on data visualization. But again, it's visualization in order to make decisions. At Uber, they gather a lot of data. By that, they can also visualize this data, because what they figured out is that, well, we could have them on a spreadsheet, but it's going to take some time to make a decision. And they actually made their visualization tool open source called Kepler GL. You could try it out yourself. For cities, this is also great to access this data. Again, it's similar to the examples I brought up before, where it was more about designing visions. Here it's about design visualization, but these things tie together because it's visualization and contextualization that provides knowledge for decision making. So one thing that comes up over and over in the podcast is the aspect about confidence in futures, and it's again touching on the examples I brought up before. So I talked to Brett Lovelady. He's a global design leader running his design studio Astro Studios since over 20 years, and on top of that he founded a couple of companies including Astro Gaming. So in Astro Gaming he founded with the assumptions that are no premium products out there for gamers, really, or the user group was not really taking seriously for a long time for a lot of brands. Different obviously to the e-gaming space right now, because now everyone takes it seriously. He had an instinct, he believed in something, and what they basically did, because their design studio, they designed everything from brand to the product experience, to the product itself, and then later on even found partners to manufacture it, made it the real thing. It gives confidence for other stakeholders, for the internal team, because they can see what they're actually building. It gives confidence for external stakeholders as well, because they can see what you're trying to achieve, make a better decision if it actually makes sense to invest. It's a tool for confidence. So design is a tool for confidence in a way. It was sold to different companies and then a few years ago to Logitech for $85 million. And I think it's a great story of designer being involved in entrepreneurship. This one is about entrepreneurship, meaning internal entrepreneurship. So what if you work in a corporation? I talked with Shiva Jaini. He is a product design manager at Google, and before that he was working at YouTube for a long time. At Google they have this rule of using 20% of the time for their own creative ideas with other colleagues, pitch certain topics. And basically what they look into working at YouTube, they said, well, a lot of parents give the phones to kids, right? The experience needs to be designed a little bit different for kids. So they started to interview parents. They started to see how kids are interacting with YouTube, and they saw all of these things that don't work, right? Later on, designed a prototype of YouTube for kids, basically, and again, went back to parents, tried it out, tried to figure out all of these things they need to adjust on the user experience. Later on, they made a pitch video, and it was shared out in the company as an idea, and then they made it a real thing, right? Because before it was just a prototype. It was not a finished product, right? It's called YouTube Kids. It's nowadays even an actual product you can download from the App Store. A visualization of what this future would mean before they actually had larger investment. And you need that in order to make a decision. Again, this is again where designers or design comes in order to drive that forward, right? Or to help out with that. Because obviously you need to solve more things than just the experience itself. Obviously there are business topics. There are technical things you need to solve, right? And another story about having design involved or design making contribution. So yeah, I think this is all from my side actually, talking about the input side and the output side, sharing some things around podcasts and some own learnings. Yeah, thank you so much for listening in.